Joining me now, Senator Chris Coons of the great state of Delaware. Thanks for coming back to the Sunday Show.
It's always good to be on with you, Jonathan.
All right, Senator. So from everything, all the reporting that we have out there, a deal is imminent. We are possibly going to see something tomorrow. Are you as confident that we are going to see a deal tomorrow?
Jonathan, I'm optimistic. I know this has been a long road, but this is a big deal. It's $579 billion in new infrastructure spending, and that's going to translate to something like 650,000 new high-skilled, high-wage jobs, good union jobs all over the country, connecting families to the internet through expanded broadband, replacing lead pipes in homes and schools, and modernizing our roads and bridges, our tunnels, highways, and a personal favorite of mine, passenger rail. So I am optimistic that we'll close this deal this week. We have a few issues still to work through, but I think this is the week we get the infrastructure bill to the floor.
All right. That sounds good. However, there still seem to be some hang-ups here and there. Late into the week, there was talk about hang-ups over transit funding. Let's have a listen to what Senator Portman had to say about that.
Transit funding has not yet been resolved, and that's important. But if we can't resolve it, then we could leave that out. I hope not. But Democrats, frankly, are not being reasonable in their requests right now. We've got a very generous offer out there that provides a significant increase in funding over the next 5 years, over 80% increase in funding.
And then, Senator Coons, your fellow Democratic Senators Brown and Carper, they put out a statement on transit funding saying we will not cut the traditional investment of transit programs in the Highway Trust Fund. Robust funding for transit must be included in the legislation. We will not support any package that neglects this fundamental part of our nation's infrastructure. You still optimistic that we're going to see a deal tomorrow?
Well, Jonathan, that makes it very clear just how important transit is. It's not the only significant issue, but it's one of the most important ones. Senator Carper is chairman of the Public Works Committee, and Senator Brown, chairman of the Banking Committee. Their support's critical, and I'm confident that will be worked out. But it's a reminder that in a bill this big that crosses so many different committees and jurisdictions, getting to the final deal is challenging. It is going to be worth it. Ultimately, this will support $1.2 trillion in new infrastructure spending over 8 years, and the $579 billion is new spending. And frankly, Jonathan, that's a big deal. There's also pieces that we have to do in this bipartisan bill. We can't just move them over into the Democrats' only reconciliation bill that we will also have to take up and pass before we can leave for August recess.
And then and that is a nice segue into what I was going to ask you next, and it's something that you're involved in. It's a bill that you are supporting, and it's one on emissions tax bill. The plan calls for federal agencies to calculate the environmental cost incurred from complying with any federal, state, regional, or local law, regulation, policy, or program designed to reduce emissions. Another complication is that while the poorest countries would be exempt from paying the tariff, it would be up to U.S. agencies to determine whether trading partners are enforcing climate change laws, so on and so forth. Are you concerned that your bill could be another thing that could not derail, but slow down the momentum to tomorrow's impending deal?
Well, Jonathan, let's be clear. What you were just describing is a bill I've just introduced that's a polluter fee that would be part of the Democrats-only budget reconciliation bill. Before we leave for August, we need to pass the framework. The details of that bill will likely be worked out in the early fall. We have to pass the budget framework before we can leave, and that's $3.5 trillion. But what you were just describing is a polluter fee so that imports of things like steel and concrete that are coming from countries like China that really hasn't stepped up to climate ambition would face an increased incoming fee. There's other parts of that reconciliation package, like a civilian climate corps, that I'm really excited about. The clean electricity standard. It is a bold and robust package of climate provisions. There's also, Jonathan, important provisions about climate in this bipartisan infrastructure bill. big investments in resiliency, in modernizing our electric grid, and in demonstrating new clean energy technologies. So we're going to make significant progress in combating climate in both bills this month.
Senator Coons, thank you for the clarification on your emissions tax bill, the Climate Corps being also part of that, but also because I think a lot of progressives wonder whether climate issues at all are going to be in this bipartisan bill. You have just told us that they are there, and so I'm sure they will be thrilled to hear that. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, thank you very much for coming back to the Sunday Show.
Thank you, Jonathan.